Hi, and welcome to According to Weeze, the podcast. With me, your girl Weeze. This is a show where we're going to have candid conversations with the hopes of finding a way forward in community. See, fundamentally, I believe that we exist at the intersection of our complex identities, politics, and our sociocultural systems. And let's be real, the only way to dismantle it all is to dissect it. So get cozy, get comfy, and let's dive in. What's up, y'all, and welcome to this episode of At the Intersection. I am super hyped. I'm very excited to have our guest here today. Y'all may have seen one Jessica Krug, this white girl from Kansas, posing as a Jess La Bombera, I think is how you say it. I'm sure our guest will correct me if I said it wrong. But last week there was a Dolezal 2.0, and my guest that we have on today is actually someone that I did not know prior, and I'm on the interwebs doing the thing that I do, sounding off on Twitter and IG and all the places, and like could not intellectualize it. And somebody sent me an article on Medium and was like, "Yo, you gotta read this. This is fire." So I read it. And my first thought was, I need to find this woman. We need to have this conversation. And the internet does what it does, because I put it out to the followers, and shout out one of my followers, I think it was Chloe, who ended up tagging you. One of my followers in the UK was like, "Oh, you mean almost Dr. Lisa Betty?" So, y'all, I am very, very, very excited to have Ms. Lisa Betty here with me today. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, thank you for having me here, Weeze. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you making the time. I appreciate you writing the article. And before we get into the article, because I have a tendency, I'm super excited. I want to talk about all the things, but say hello to the people, introduce yourself, tell the people who you are.
So I am Lisa Betty. I am historian, writer, currently in a PhD program at Fordham University. I am in a history PhD program. I also do anti-racism work, just like Weeze, mostly around anti-racist pedagogy in the classroom and anti-racist pedagogy in kind of university settings, post-secondary in post-secondary settings, wherever they are. But that's the space that I'm in currently.
Perfect.
I also do sustainability and farming and all this other weird stuff.
But, okay, so when the apocalypse does come, you got all the skills.
I hope so, but my family members have all the skills actually.
Perfect.
So I've been raised I've been raised what the general public would call apocalyptic, but what we call is like, you don't know how to farm your own food. Like, right. Who does it?
Right. What's wrong with you?
So I'm first generation non-farmer, urban in the Northeast.
Okay.
But most of my family is from the South, and from the South of the U.S. and Jamaica. And there's some, with the South of the U.S., that's 2 generations away from farming. In Jamaica, my mother grew up farming. So we're the only generation that doesn't have some of those technical skills, but we're attempting to gain them.
That's dope. I feel like there's a whole nother podcast episode there. We might have to have you back just to talk about that.
Yeah, there's a podcast with my other friends in sustainability, Dominic Drakeford and Keshru Jenkins, called Conscious Chatter, where I do talk about some of this stuff.
Perfect.
Decolonizing sustainability.
Oh,
all this stuff.
Okay. So what was it called? We're gonna plug everybody.
So it's we'll plug it. Decolonizing the sustainability fashion agenda.
Okay.
And we can put that in the show.
I was gonna say we'll put it in the show notes, so y'all heard that. There you go.
And that's a whole situation. That was a good podcast. So I do. I'll send it to you.
Perfect.
We broke it down.
Perfect. I love it. So, Lisa, let's talk about Dolezal 2.0. So, I'm gonna call her by her real name, Jessica Krug, a white woman from Kansas. So for y'all that have been asleep under a rock, A white woman from Kansas decided that being white wasn't cool enough for her. And so she literally pulled a dolezal. She got a degree in Africana studies, so she studied Black folk. She picked the version of Blackness that was most believable for her to co-opt. She entered into all Black spaces. She got real bold and became, again, just like a dolezal, right? Like full activist, taking up all the space. Wrote some books, and then wrote an apology, quote unquote. And we'll get to your article, which I love, is called Jessica Krug's Medium post is not an apology, because it wasn't. But before we get there, this news dropped last Thursday. Was it Thursday or Friday? End of last week.
Thursday.
It was Thursday.
I think it was the 3rd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me, like, what, because I'm sitting at home about to like do some work, and someone sends me this article, and all it says is, girl, her original article, not yours, hers. And so I'm sitting at home, and I just remember distinctly being upset for all the obvious reasons, but then feeling like an extra level of rage because she personally tried on my actual very like complex, nuanced identity of being, like a Northwest African tribal lineage and ancestry. And I'm still hot. But tell me, like, where were you? What was happening? What were you feeling? Like, talk us through that moment before you were like, oh, she got me fucked up. I got to write an article.
So I was basically just walking home in the late evening, I think from the grocery store. And I see the article. I don't even know what I saw it on. I just saw it on my phone, and I saw that it was George Washington University. So the first thing I thought, and then I saw Africana Studies. And the first thing I thought was that this is the department I came from.
Mm-hmm.
This is a department that didn't exist until students protested, until staff facilitated, until even faculty members organized, and particularly faculty members that are currently faculty still there, Africana Studies program. So to know that a specific program, because I'm an Africana Studies minor, a specific program that I came from was being kind of put under just, this, basically attacked. That's what I felt. Because I was just like, how would this affect this department? Yeah. How will this affect the faculty members that knew her, or the Black faculty members in particular that knew her or were associated with her, or the Black faculty members that are currently at GW? How would it affect them? And the students, how would it affect the students that are currently at the university, who are taking classes under this woman, who are being mentored by this woman? Yeah. It felt as if it just felt like it was just an attack. Yeah. Someone with, a narcissistic personality situation, I don't know if it's disorder or whatever, but narcissistic personality came in and tried to do something specifically to harm and create trauma and pain in this particular department, in other spaces as well. But because I know this particular department, I felt a closeness to the situation. I wanted to check on faculty that I knew, and I hesitated. I think I looked at the contact and their number, and I hesitated because I was just like, everyone's probably trying to contact these faculty members. So when I went home, the first thing I did was just start writing. Just an outline and just start writing. Then one of my friends, Whitney McGuire, she and Rahima Moultrie, they both texted me, and as a group text, like some other group texts that we have, and said, "Did you see this?" And I just went to them. I said, I'm writing a blog, an article / blog post right now. Don't worry about it. I got this. They were like, okay. He
said, I got this, sis. It's good.
Because everyone is drained at this point. Yeah. You know what I mean? Everyone is drained. Everyone is tired. There's so much going on. The last thing we need is for one, attention to come off of the real important things
Right.
that need to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and then for two, um, for spaces that are safe spaces, that are spaces that we're able to create, kind of to activate students, to activate ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
spaces that we're able to engage in like deep thought, deep political thought about our identity, deep
Yeah.
political thought about our culture, deep political thought about colonization and decolonization, to be co-opted by somebody who has narcissistic and parasitic tendencies, and that was a problem for me.
Yeah.
But so that's the space I wrote it from. I wrote it from, if they're gonna Google you, they're gonna find me.
Right. I heard
I
that.
want them to Google you
Yeah.
and find me.
Yeah. And I think, you said this before we started recording, and I really think it's important to talk about. So talk us through also a little bit around this idea of like, she doesn't, first of all, what her article really was, because Lord knows it wasn't an apology. And two, the need to make sure that she doesn't get the last word.
Yeah, so definitely wasn't an apology. It referred, whenever someone, whenever in a situation, we already know when it comes on to, particularly when white people apologize for doing, racist acts and
Yeah.
acts of violence, all of this,
Mm-hmm.
there's always a tendency to move into their personal mental health.
Yes.
And mental health is important.
Absolutely.
It's important for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes on, and I'm not all lives mattering
Right.
mental health,
Right.
but mental health is important. But
Yeah.
mental health is also personal,
Yeah.
and mental health cannot be used as justification, particularly for white people, because it's
Mhm.
particularly white people are allowed
Yes.
in the media and however to use mental health as a reasoning for their racist acts
Absolutely.
and acts of aggression
Mm-hmm.
and anti-black acts, and that is unfair, and we need to put a hold, or put a pin in that justification, and put a pin in that narrative, because her saying that this is caused by mental health issues, this was very calculative, this was very narcissistic, this is very parasitic.
Mm-hmm.
This goes beyond your personal mental health, and whatever healing that you receive or you don't receive, um, is very much separate from the reparations that must happen
Mm-hmm.
because of these acts of violence that you committed. It's particularly because she's in my specific industry
Yeah.
of academia, an industry where, people, are particularly black women who study the same. She's studying the same thing as similar things that I'm doing. She's going into
Yeah.
communities. She's doing oral history. She's talking about Marinage and maroon communities, communities that were able to escape
Yeah.
enslavement, or also communities that were able to build up societies while enslavement was happening, but build up
Yeah.
these free societies. So she's in this space studying what I'm studying, but she gets fellowship, she gets money, she
Uh-huh.
gets this, she gets that, she gets positions at high ranking universities. And a lot of us don't get those things. And I
Right.
know people who do the same exact work that she does at an even higher level, but don't get the same opportunities that she does.
Yeah.
Because as much as quote unquote black as she attempted to present herself, she still knew how to navigate as a white woman.
And not only that, I think it's
Still knew how to
really
do that.
100%, but I also think it's really important. I don't want the listeners to lose out on just how calculated this was. This woman
Mhm.
made it a choice, an
Yes.
active choice to pour time, energy, and money into studying. Like Africana
Yes.
studies is not just like, okay, I'm gonna learn about Black history. Like
Yeah.
you really truly studied in depth and wrote
Yeah.
books
Yep.
on the diaspora, on
Mhm.
colonization, on
Mhm.
culture, civilization, the evolution of the ways in
Mhm.
which Black bodies have been historically, not only bodies, but bodies, cultures, family lineages, ancestry, ways of life, cultures, customs have been ravaged by whiteness and imperialism and
Mhm.
colonization.
Mhm.
And then chose the version, which is why I am so personally mad, chose the version. First, it was like, I'm gonna choose the version that I think I can quote unquote get away with.
Yes.
Right. So first she was like, oh, and I think she even said, first I chose North African blackness.
Mhm.
And then somebody should have told her how complex and nuanced living that life is. I could have told her, like, this is not that easy. So then she was like, ooh, let me try something else. And then she finally landed on the, Afro Latina, like that particular identity, because it was more believable for her to co-opt. It was an easier way for her to co-opt blackness. And in her studying, there is nothing in this world that will convince me that she did not come across a minor concept called colorism.
Yeah, thank you.
And in that, she understands. And my listeners know, because I talk about colorism all the time, and the ways in which, if you really are for the culture, then you understand that it is actually your responsibility to counteract colorism by using colorism against white society to make room for those that are deeply melanited, who are normally overlooked and silenced and erased in ways that light skin or ambiguous are not. So she intentionally used that, which is a weapon of the system and a weapon of whiteness, to navigate the space. Because as a white woman, she's not exceptional, she's not interesting. But as a light-skinned Afro-Latina in an Africana studies department, riddled with visibly black and dark-skinned, deeply melanated women, oh, well, she's a poster child.
Yeah, she definitely is. And she knew that. You
100%.
definitely hold into that. Yeah, she definitely knew that, because she's studying that.
Exactly.
I think the last article that she wrote was like Blackness in Puerto Rico or something like that. And I hope they retract the entire stuff. I don't care if it was gospel, burn it at this point. Because it's nothing. It's, I can easily read other people's work and then, then write an article, because it's not coming from her brain. It's coming from, if this is her mode of just kind of parasitically just kind of extracting, then all of her work is an extraction of Black women's work and labor. That's what we have to see this as not her original thinking, because that's her mode of life. So that's how she's working professionally too. But you honed into that, where she understood white supremacy and understood colorism within the landscape of the African diaspora, within the landscape of Black cultures, wherever they may land, particularly by honing in on Puerto Ricanness. And me and a colleague, and you can at her work, Brinka Chopra PR, but I'll put the colleagues work in. But Tay, she writes, me and her were talking about the weaponization of Puerto Ricanness in particular, and Puerto Ricanness, and Puerto Ricanness in the landscape of, the three roots and the Taino and the African and the Spaniard, in that narrative, as being, that narrative of kind of like the racial democracy narrative, as also being weaponized in a type of way. So she understood the way just light-skinned Puerto Ricanness and even white Puerto Ricanness has been weaponized in the whole U.S. landscape. With the JLOs and this, that, and the other. So her understanding of that, it basically allowed her to step in this space and say, I'm Afro-Latina, which even in that space, highly contested space, she is not. And so, her claiming that space is very controversial in itself. And Black Latinx, particularly visibly Black Latinx women, who are Dr. Figueroa, one of them, who also had a wonderful thread on Twitter, really that honed in deeply into this. So this is a very tenuous place, and there are Black Puerto Rican women who are scholars who are in this space, always attempting to find space, who are given opportunities, or whose work isn't adequately being propagated or circulated, and for her to just kind of jump in and say, this is who I am, and then also create this caricature behind it, is also important. I think three things that have come up for me when it comes onto her caricature is that, for one, she talks about being poor. And the way that she talked about being poor, well, let me say the one. So her poverty, code switching,
Mm-hmm.
and I done forgot about the last one, but let me talk about poverty, poverty and code switching.
Okay.
So with poverty, the way she talked about being poor within the landscape of actually putting it in her bio, I'm an unrepentant, unreformed child of the hood. Poor people don't do that. Speaking from someone who has struggled with financial
Okay.
insecurity throughout my life and who have friends from a variety of circumstances. We all didn't have the same circumstances,
Yep.
but from a wide variety of circumstances, of real poverty,
Yeah.
trying to get through college, trying to help family as we're going through graduate school.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Having apartments in our name, taking leadership, financial leadership in our family throughout the different circumstances.
When you're still trying to figure out just how
Yes,
to adult, because you just got to
yes,
adulthood, like
yes. No, you and kind of been adulting since
since
being
you were a
teenagers,
kid. Yep.
because you're having to take on
Yep.
these type of situations. You don't talk about your poverty in that way. In
Yep.
this society, particularly in the US, you're not even allowed. You're ashamed of those things.
Yes.
You keep those things to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the fact that she put it on Front Street, unless it's a narrative that you're creating, connecting to your community, but if
Right.
it's something where it's like, if she just was trying to be some kind of like hood representative, and it didn't make sense because people who are from the hood and people have navigated the hood and people who have navigated poverty don't talk about poverty like that.
And not only that, once
So
again,
that
a
was the
really,
first.
yeah, but I want to bring it back for the listeners. This woman studied
Yes.
Blackness, the Black diaspora, the African diaspora, historically, right, from ancient civilizations to today, which means that she also, once again, weaponized whiteness
Yeah.
by reinforcing caricaturizations and stereotypes of Black identity. Oh, well, let me make myself seem more Black. Yeah, I'm a child of the hood. No, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
No, no.
So I didn't buy that
Yeah,
child of the hood stuff, but it was definitely connected to blackface.
yeah.
And then in addition to that, her lack of code switching. One
Mm-hmm.
thing you learn 101, about being Black, about being from different environments, about understanding the different environments that you're from, and then bringing it to, say, mainstream
Mm-hmm.
academic, well-resourced, very white institutions. You learn how to code switch.
You have to.
But yes, you have, that's your survival.
Yeah,
But the fact that she wasn't doing that also was a highlight for people.
yeah.
You see the different, things that I've seen on her was the biggest thing, that people were talking about, was just her lack of like tactfully code switching, and people
Yeah,
didn't understand, like, why are you, acting in this way in front of these white people?
right.
That's strange.
You
Why
know
are
we
you
don't do
going
that in
to
front of
work?
company.
Yes. Like, this is Mitt's company.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't do that in front of Mitt's company. And so, her lack of code switching was also, highlighted to people. And then going back to the mixing, code switching, the kind of trauma, poverty porn that she tried to
Mm-hmm.
exude, through this kind of hood narrative, is also, who was she black facing for? Because
Mm-hmm.
if she's in all white institutions, and this is, I'm gonna try to write on this. I feel like I'm
Mm.
like exhausted, but I do want to write on this. Is that within the landscape of the academy, and the academy that she is in is particularly predominantly white, well-resourced institutions. That's where she's being employed. Um, is that she's black facing for white people. She's not doing it like Black people are collateral damage at this point. She just, she just kind of does it to say, yeah, I went to Afro punk and I did something. But it's for white people to see that she's doing things. I think it had absolutely positively nothing to do with actual Black people. And then when you think about the history of blackface was done by white people for white people. So this whole say black fishing plus plus whatever cultural appropriation and the other terminology that we're currently using to explain this situation and others that are similar is basically black facing. And it's why did she not only why did she do this, but why were these academic institutions receptive to her blackface? How did she get hired? Why did she get hired? Why did she get all of this money when in portraying in this blackface academic portrayal? And so we really do have to look at that, because they rather have particularly her doing blackface than an actual blackface. No Black woman, in particular, as I in some of the, in particularly the article I was writing, that she's coming into a certain position of cis heteronormative. She's not coming in as disabled. She's not coming in as queer. She's not coming in as dark skin with tightly textured hair. She's coming in a particular position of power and privilege, and we have to really, and she knows that she's doing that. That's why she's even doing it. But it's not only for her kind of narcissistic self-satisfaction. It's because this is what the Academy wants. The Academy wants someone with that has the that shows kind of those extremes, that can also navigate white spaces in a particular way. And not look too Black or not look Black at all, because that it's all about their comfort. They're comfortable with stereotypes and blackface. They're comfortable with someone that can hit the benchmarks, write what they need to write, do what they need to do, navigate the way they need to navigate. And they're also comfortable with people who are lighter or racially ambiguous. So we have to look at, why was the Academy so comfortable in moving this woman through those spaces with so much ease? At 38, a tenured faculty member. That is something that Black women are fighting for.
That point particularly was something that, and I want to talk about reparations, because you mentioned it in your article, and I think it's really important that we touch on it. But that point particularly really lit me on fire, because to me, it is such a perfect, again, just a perfect moment, a perfect example of how this was not only, we've said it before, right, calculated, but this was truly self-serving. This was not rooted in mental illness. This was not rooted in, I think she called herself a coward, right? This was not rooted in any of those things. This was rooted in the fact that she had a very specific goal, and she knew that if she put on the performance, she blackfaced it up, that she could achieve certain life markers that are, quite frankly, to your point, unheard of for actual Black women.
Very difficult.
and visibly Black and deeply melanated Black women to achieve at 38. Kimberly Crenshaw is just now being honored for years and years and years of being brilliant. Just now in 2020. And people are still arguing with her about intersectionality. Go somewhere. Go somewhere else.
No,
Leave Dr. Crenshaw alone. But you see what I'm saying? again, and I know you know this, but this is really a point for the listeners. Like this was on
Mhm.
purpose. This was on purpose. And how dare you position yourself as an activist amongst all the other things, and then continue to co-op spaces and take up space from those that you supposedly are fighting for the liberation of. You're
Yeah.
full of a lot of things. You're not just full of shit, like narcissism, ego, pride, entitlement, privilege. Like she never checked her privilege. Never. Never. At no point. She decided she wanted to go. She was gonna put on, she was gonna wear blackness, right? She went through a couple versions of it. And then so that she could get to it, no matter who it hurt, no matter who it impacted, because she
And then
understood how whiteness operated
she
that
thought she
well.
won, but she still, she
And she
still,
won.
and the point,
Well,
I think there's another point to
until
this
now.
is that she still would be
She
there
thought she
if
won.
there weren't people, particularly Black people, Black women, who were going to say, bring this to public attention.
So I was gonna ask you, because you're on the ends. So the word on the street,
Yeah, yeah.
but I mean, you at least like have,
Thanks.
connections to GW, like that's your department. So the word on the internet is that it was actually two young Black women. I think maybe that were in the department, or students. It's still a little unclear because there's so many conflicting reports. You know how the internet works. That basically figured it out. That started questioning. They were like, to your point, they were like, the math ain't mathing. Like something doesn't add up. And so they started doing research, and they were going to out her.
Not even conflicting stories. I feel like there are just multiple people that met her in multiple
Yes, and there are
circumstances
conflicting
that
stories.
were
Let's
just
be clear.
like, this is ridiculous. And I think that's one of the circumstances. I think that this was a bottle keg. Like
Okay,
there were multiple people, multiple communities that felt
got it.
harmed by her blackface, and were just like,
Yeah,
nah. So at any point in time, there could have been anyone that would have quote
mm-hmm.
unquote outed her, but she was outing herself. She didn't
Yeah,
know how to code switch. She was just doing, you was talking, just saying I'm from Puerto
got it.
Rico, and it'll be like, oh, what part?
Yeah,
I don't know. So it's like,
right,
what?
right,
Oh, I'm from the projects in you know in the Bronx, and they were like,
right.
oh, well, I'm from this project.
Yeah.
Well, I'm from the same one. How?
How?
So
Clearly, you haven't spent a lot of time in a project. And again, not to glorify the projects, but like, if you grew up in the same project as somebody, y'all at least know one person in common.
when you talk to people from the Bronx, even my mentor right now, she's from the Bronx. She knows, and she's in her 60s. She knows the streets. She tells me stories about what streets, when she would come home to the Bronx from college in her 20s, what streets she would walk on to get her favorite patties, to get her favorite
Yep.
um, knishes, to get her favorite
Mm-hmm.
different things, and what trains she would go
Yeah.
on, and this, that, and the other.
Yep.
So when you meet people from the Bronx, they have a very intimate relationship with the streets and the this and these places and that.
Yeah.
So um, so I know she gave herself away by just like not knowing anything. Even with the students and the communities that I work with, they know like the stops in the
Yeah.
street. Even just like it's
Yeah.
just a different a different conversation, because there's a lot of pride
Mm-hmm.
in where they come
Yes.
from, and their neighborhoods, and how they navigate their neighborhoods. So
Yeah.
it's just like, so when you just like talk, people can see right through you very easily. And
Mm.
as much as she thought that she was entering an ambiguous and a kind of like anybody can be Puerto Rican type of space, where it's like, no, this is a very specific space. And even in the realms of Black Puerto Ricanness in the Bronx, that's also a very specific space. And
Yeah.
that's also a space that's um a space that has seen its challenges with Black people asserting identity and pride, particularly about being Black Puerto Rican in the Bronx, and for her to take up that space. So I do write some statistics in the article in which 3% of Black women are a part of the university at degree granting institutions. These include community colleges and historically Black colleges. So not necessarily well-resourced colleges. At the same time, you have 3% are identify as Latinx or Hispanic at degree. So 6% of this space at degree granting institutions. And then when it comes on to Black Latinx women, of course, this is going to be a smaller space because you don't necessarily within the academy. Black spaces are just coming forward right now. Black spaces are just being funded. Postdoctoral positions funded. They're just putting in, Afro Latinx or Black Latinx a specific a faculty positions. So within that space is a very small space as well. You have Dr. Garcia Pena, who wasn't granted a tenure at Harvard, and all the work she did at Harvard from A to Z, and was not granted tenure. So even when you contribute to a space, and you give that space your all at the most prestigious space, but you even add value as a Black woman, or in the case of Garcia Pena as a Black Latinx woman, it's just like you can be thrown away at any point in time. So for her to take that space from an actual Black Puerto Rican woman, it is disgusting and disturbing, especially because I know Black Puerto Rican scholars who deserve to teach at well-resourced institutions, and that would be loved by students of color, Black students in particular, at George Washington University. So it's just very disturbing, the levels of just how much space. And then on the inverse of that, 35% of the academy are white women. So she took the most smallest slither, like a 0.5% versus her 35, and she decided, I want the 0.5%. I'm gonna take up space in that 0.5% or that little slither of a 0.5%.
Because she can be exceptional there, right? So she could be exceptional, and that's really what it comes down to. Jessica Krug was so unhappy being an ordinary white woman that she bounced around the diaspora until she felt as though she had done the right version of Blackness to be exceptional. Because to your point earlier, she was still operating as a white woman.
She was, because she could hit those benchmarks.
Exactly.
She hit those benchmarks like that. 38 tenure. She hit those benchmarks. She knew what she was doing.
Oh, 100%. And you made a really, really good point for reparations in your Medium blog. So, and I want to, because people are always like, well, how are reparations feasible? There's a lot of versions of reparations.
A lot.
And this is one of them. So I want you to talk to us, because I think I reposted, when I reposted your article, I was like, big same, what Lisa said. Because I love how direct and clear it is, but I do think that it is very necessary. And so I'd love for you to talk about what that could look like and why it's so important.
So two things I'll put out there is that even in response to this Medium post, I've had people respond by saying, I did some research on some of the grants that she's received, some of the positions that she's held, and here are the stipulations for those positions, and they were supposed to be held by a minoritized candidate, a candidate from a marginalized
Mm.
group or underrepresented
Yep.
group, from this space, a candidate that is, from a low resource or low income community, or this, something, that, and the other. So she literally was taking resources, because I've had people do the due diligence, of just outlining those
Yeah.
things. So these are like specific grants, scholarships, fellowships, research grants, that she has taken, that were specifically for my, quote unquote, it says minority candidates, or candidates from
Yeah.
underrepresented groups, and even
Yeah.
candidates from low income backgrounds. So she's literally taking those scholarships. So that's the first, and she was taking those from college. So that's the first. The other part of it would be, if we're thinking about these teaching positions in Africana
Mm-hmm.
studies in particular, there are white, faculty members in Africana studies programs. But if a program is really attempting to, and particularly because within Africana studies, Black studies, it's probably the most diverse, candidate pool. If anything, when you go to ethnic studies, you will find, um, potential candidates that come from those backgrounds that they're studying. It's particularly
Yeah.
like now, as
Yeah.
we want to know who we are. We want to know
Right.
what the lies that we were told, and we want to also create new stories, and compelling stories about our communities. And so,
Mm-hmm.
with the diversity, if they were attempting, particularly for specific teaching positions, to um, to have that for a diverse candidate, a candidate from a diverse or underrepresented background, that's also, a call for reparations. For paid speaking engagements, if they were looking for someone to speak for the Afro Latinx communities, for Black Puerto Rican communities, she needs to give that money back. If
Mm-hmm.
like, there's so many
Yeah.
things, because if she was writing for a grant or fellowship or something, not for a fellowship, but if she was writing for a research, any research monies, and she exuded her background as a community member, to compel them to give her government federally funded, however, or private foundation research monies, and her
Mm-hmm.
story as an unrepentant child of the hood, and as an Afro Latinx, and as a Black Latinx, if that was a part of her narrative, then that's a call for reparations. Give that money back.
Yeah.
like there's
Yeah.
so many small things, and then not only that, then these institutions need to also reflect on why they so easily gave this woman money, published this
Yep.
woman, gave this woman triage into these spaces that they so heartily, exclude us from,
Mm-hmm.
and they need to really speak to that. So
Yeah.
so what George Washington University needs to give more buttress funding and support to the Africana Studies program, because they gave this woman tenure. Tenure is not just
Yeah.
one little process. Tenure is a layered process. And as
Mm-hmm.
much as Black communities in particular, can be set to some sort of, not say blame, but some sort of kind of responsibility for letting certain people in, because they sometimes they talk the talk, they walk the walk. And so,
Yep.
and we, Black communities have to be, not necessarily a blame, but I'm trying to figure out the words for this, but take responsibility for letting people in. But sometimes it's because
Yeah.
they know of colorism and white supremacy
Right.
and how it works within the dynamics of Black and African, diasporic communities. They know how it
Mm-hmm.
works, but
Yep.
and they're parasites. But at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, we have to. There's bigger things to be answered to. Why these
Yeah.
institutions then, kind of, why are we then allow ourselves to be collateral damage in
Yeah.
building this woman's career. And we were tricked. You can't say, okay, oh, it's our fault. You know, you
Yeah.
can't, we're the victim. She's not the victim.
Yeah.
Um, but
And that's something can we like really reinforce that real quick, because
that
her
we're the
entire
victim.
apology, yes, her entire apology was the most classic white womaning I have ever seen. It was
Yes.
like, I did a thing. I know that it was bad, but let me shed these tears. Let me now enter into victimhood, white centering. To your point, use mental state
Yeah.
as a get out of jail free card, which is the white go to,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let me then let me then, disparage myself. I'm a coward. No, actually, I think that you were real fucking brave to do all the things that you did. That is not cowardice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said this earlier, and I really this is like the most clear indicator for why reparations are necessary. This whole like, and I'm gonna cancel myself. Like, first of all, you don't get to cancel yourself. We gonna cancel you. One. Two, you don't also get to Homer Simpson like fade into the bushes and
Mm-hmm.
disappear.
Mm-hmm.
There is a there is a recourse that needs to occur.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love for you to bless the folks with your analogy that you used of cable, because that was so good.
So basically, you can't just cancel cable and then be like, bye, I'm not going to pay the bill. I'm not going to give the equipment back. Um, you have to give the equipment back and the bill will go on your
Yeah.
credit. Like, you know,
Right.
you will owe your cable bill for life. It's on your credit. So it's not, you just can't cancel something and then just walk away, particularly in this society where
Yes.
there's a society where, it's a monetary society where, it's a capitalistic society where it's about
Mm-hmm.
money and transactional type of society. You can't do that. So if you can't do that with cable, then you can't do that with like an entire career.
Right. And with actual harm that
Yep,
you have
harm that you
caused
created.
to
Because
an entire population of people.
yeah, and I think the thing that's scary about it is that, well, as I was reflecting earlier on our victimhood, when you're a
Yeah.
victim to these types of situations, you then feel like, what did I do? And
Yes.
and there were points where she studied, and I think the thing is that she studied our communal insecurities. She
Yep.
studied our just the holes in our community that she could move herself through. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she studied the deep traumas in our community.
Yes.
If she's saying that she's a light skinned um, Black woman from Puerto Rico, or whose family's from Puerto Rico, there's trauma connected to that identity.
Mm-hmm.
The trauma of slavery, trauma of rape, trauma
Mm-hmm.
of colorism and
Mm-hmm.
intercommunal harm and intercommunal conflict. So she's studying all those spaces. And at the same time, I think we can't, at the same time, we can't blame ourselves for our just insecurities and trauma as a community, but at the same time,
Yeah.
we have to figure out what happened and
Yeah.
how did we let this woman take these insecurities, take these spaces of deep trauma, and then flip it into an entire career where
Mm-hmm.
she was very successful.
Yeah.
And that's the space, because even as we have Black women right now today that are studying these things, that are moving through these things, and are being rejected. When
Yep.
talk about colorism, you talk about this, you talk about, all of these aspects of this deep trauma, all of these aspects of um, of just intercommunal conflict that needs to be spoken about, and
Mm-hmm.
they're rejected. You know, I write about, say, I'll put something about cultural appropriation and Adele at Notting Hill, and
Lord.
I'm being rejected by people because they, and I'm just like, are you rejecting it because it's coming from me? And so there's some
Right.
like there's some like deep thought that needs to happen where,
Yeah.
you know, how our communities are moving um through these traumas, and then how we need to make sure that people don't a you know, a monetize or take
Hmm.
advantage of these spaces as they're
Yeah.
becoming privy to them. um
Yeah.
because that's the saddest thing for me, is how did, and particularly because it's my community at GW, but just like me thinking, like, how did she move herself through all these Black communities and
That's
be
my
able
biggest
to, like,
question.
yeah, and be able to kind of like, you know, gain access. She was able to
Yeah.
gain access, even though she was so illegitimate. Like, she wasn't even, like,
Yeah.
she didn't even do a good job because she was
Right.
black facing, very badly black facing for Black people,
Black
that some
folks.
Black
Yep.
people were buying it and allowed her to take
Yeah.
up space. That's the scary part for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. I always say that, white supremacy and the culture of whiteness is inherently a narcissism, right?
Yeah.
Like it operates as a narcissist. And so gaslighting is a huge part of it. And I think that the thing that I really want to make sure that folks are hearing here is that she didn't just cause harm in general, right? Like, yes, she caused harm in general. She caused harm in more so to the people that, right, she had personal interactions with, but very much so to these Black communities that let her in. There are a number of activists, right, because that's a space that I'm in, that literally posted when this news came out, and they were like, and I'm paraphrasing because so many of them said it, and they're all like, East Coast folks, that I'm connected to or knew from when I lived in New York, that were like, this just happened, or like, just found out that Jess La Bombera is actually Jessica A. Krug. I let this woman into my home. I let this woman into my
Oh,
space. I gave her a platform thinking that I was uplifting, a sister or like a Black woman. And these are Black folk. And I am so devastated. How did I get God? I need a couple days off. You want to talk about mental health? Like, you want to talk about mental health, Jessica?
and exactly. And that's the scariest part to me, is that
Yes.
we are the victims, but it's like, how you let this happen? But
How?
you can't, when you are any type of trauma that happens at this level of how did I let this happen? You just have to know that this was a lot bigger than you. And I
Exactly.
understand that, but you still need to reflect on the people that enter these very kind
Mm-hmm.
of important and vital communities, because they're not, because of all the things that are being thrown at us. We need stability. We need good people. We need to be centered.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't have kind of outsiders that talk the talk because they've maybe read it in a book by an actual Black woman, and they're just
Right.
like, da, 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 da. And they,
Mm-hmm.
just like quoting basically bell hooks word for word, quoting Angela Davis in the book, looking
Right.
at you, looking how you react. Oh, okay, she liked that line.
Like that worked.
It's
Oh, okay.
basically
Okay. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a whole
Highlight.
script,
Highlight.
a whole script that she's, yeah, basically, Ruth Gilmore just like scripting it up. And so we
Yeah.
have to be very aware of this as an actual thing.
Yeah.
And we also have to be aware of what's happening within the academy, that's allowing um, people to actually gain position, by, and it's always been a fact. The academy has always extracted from communities of
Yeah.
color and indigenous communities.
100%. Yeah.
That's just fact. But the
Yeah.
way that they're doing it has transformed, because at the end of the day, we're also, people from the community are entering the academy and saying that all of this is bullshit, or
Yep.
no, or we have access that they don't, and then
Yep.
there's a competition there. So they
Absolutely.
feel as if if you come in with this access because you were a community organizer, or you're just because your blackness and the comfort you exude with other Black communities or immigrant communities kind of allows you to move in certain spaces that they can't. There's also competition level to that
Yeah.
we also have to understand. Um, and her being an ordinary white woman for her wouldn't work, not with all of these just like amazing Black Latinx scholars that I know. um you know it just would not work. Miriam Jimenez just passed away, and she was the editor of the Afro Latinx reader, or Afro Latin reader, and with her husband, who I was one of my mentors before he passed away, Juan Flores, and she's a Black Puerto Rican woman, and she just passed away. And so for and she led the way and gave a lot of space to specifically Black Latinx women, and just Black women in general, writing about the Caribbean, writing about diaspora. She just is in that space. So I just, for her to take away from that lineage that Black women are creating of all just dimensions, and in all ways and in all regions, from all sectors of the diaspora, lifting up other Black women from all sectors of the diaspora, is very disheartening, because she even took up space there. People may have mentored her, knowing her story, and that took away from a Black woman being mentored by that person. So we are the victims in this. This is absolutely trauma, and as much as we have to do some internal regrouping, as this, like, how did this happen, which is plausible, which you have to do, but we have to know that this is also a lot bigger than us. This happened because this person knew how to navigate these other spaces that then triaged into spaces that were defined by Blackness, or community spaces. So there was just a lot going on, and it's a lot bigger than us. But we do have to do some internal thinking of the trauma that has been caused, and the way this woman moved and gained access to our communities, and that how we need to start really thinking about how colorism and white supremacy really moves in our spaces, that we would allow someone who is a white woman to enter this space, and claim Blackness, and for us not to necessarily follow. It's for some people not to follow up on her claims, and just kind of allow her to be in that space.
Somebody should ask her to make potato salad.
But
I'm just kidding.
I want to put raisins. The hell, we got her.
Exactly. Like, what was it? No. Oh, you don't bake your mac and cheese?
Like, make sofrito. Let's see it.
There we go. That's right. Because she was Puerto Rican. That's right. That's right. Make me some coquito, and then let's talk.
Make some pique sauce. Let's see it. Because I feel we can make pique sauce, and we I mean, it's Jamaican, so we're very close. But still,
right.
I want to see you.
That's right. Because one of her quotes, what was it? It was like, first I tried on North African Blackness, and then U.S. rooted Blackness, and finally Caribbean Blackness from the Bronx.
And the thing is that makes
you
me
just went all the way around.
is that my scholarly work is on Caribbean Blackness from the Bronx. That's my work. I'm not even kidding. My dissertation is on Caribbean Blackness from the Bronx. So look at me looking at her like, did you?
Right.
Really? You thought that you were Caribbean Blackness from the Bronx. where
I wish at some point she had run across you so you could be like, hold on, wait,
I
let me
really
get my
want
pen
to
out.
remember. I really want to know. I don't think, but maybe she was just like I can't remember
Unexceptional.
people. Yeah, I can't. I have a memory like an elephant. But if I can't distinguish you, if there's nothing like that pops, I don't think. I think
Yeah,
you just kind of blend in with the background.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think if she, and also, these are people who are narcissistic and have parasitic type of um, personalities. They don't go close to people who can just get
yep,
it, you know.
yep.
They don't. If because I'm a person that you tell me something, I'm gonna ask you questions and I'm gonna be like, that was weird. Nah, she's
Yeah.
lying. Like I can tell, and they know those people, so they kind
Yeah,
of tiptoe and walk around and won't, engage with those type of people. They that a
yeah,
narcissist that's a narcissistic, person's fear are those
yeah,
types of people that understand energy and
yeah,
understand kind of how people move, and if people are lying or if people are, I just, so I if she saw me from a mile away, she would know she
she'd be
can't
like,
talk to me.
nah,
She wouldn't be
nah.
able to talk to me.
Yeah, which, you know what, just and before I wrap us up, so I'll say this quickly so I don't take us on a tangent, because I know we could probably spend another hour here. It actually, just as you said that, I'm thinking about the way in which she has positioned herself historically, obviously just from what I know from reading about her, as a tenured professor. So she's put herself in a power dynamic to where her students, right, like you already have that power dynamic which narcissists are going to thrive off of.
Yes.
They're inherently in a power dynamic. What do we teach in academia? You don't question your professor, right? They are right. You just consume whatever they put out there and you go with it.
Mm-hmm.
One. Two, as a quote unquote activist, placing herself in underserved communities as though she was a savior. Obviously, it's white saviorism in blackface,
Yeah.
but right, again, being the savior, the no, I got y'all, to folks who have just waited for somebody to have their back.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and then her what did I read? Her book was on Angola,
Mm.
right? If I'm
No,
correct.
you're correct.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. So right, so then even writing a book, no shade to Angola. I'm not saying this because, nobody cares about Angola. It's not that. But you then proceeded to write a book which should be written, right? The story needs to be told. It probably shouldn't be told by you, but it needs to be told. But again, you wrote a book about a very specific thing that is also not like widely being discussed. You
Yeah.
didn't touch American blackness.
No.
For a Puerto Rican, supposed African or black Puerto Rican woman, you didn't touch Puerto Rico. You chose Angola.
Mm-hmm.
You intentionally chose the motherland, which was far enough off from the United States, which, being African, I can tell you, most white Americans in academia are just going to be like, this is lovely, because they don't know anything about the motherland, our history, what we've been through as a continent, as a peoples, and we were talking about this earlier, what everybody has run through us and done, from, the French and the English and the Dutch and the Arabs and the Turkish and the Spanish and the Romans, and since the dawn of time. So white people can be like, oh, this is such an amazing book. This is wonderful. We're just going to take this as fact. Thank you so much.
It's true.
Right? She over and over and over again positioned herself in everything that she did to be able to have the least amount of questioning or least amount of pushback.
It's true.
Yo, the more that I think about it, I'm like, this woman is not just calculated, she is diabolical. I'm like getting more angry all over again.
But it's true. It's particularly with Angola. People don't necessarily study the Lusophone Africa as much as any other space.
Any
Usually
Exactly.
it's the English speaking, African
Yep.
countries, maybe the French speaking, but
Mm-hmm.
the Portuguese colonized ones and the German colonized ones are the ones that are kind of least talked about.
That
So
Americans, I guarantee, don't even know that Portugal and Germany colonized Africa.
yeah.
In the conversations that I have with American educated folks,
Mhm.
they're like, oh, the French and the English and then the Dutch, but I only know that because of South Africa.
Yeah.
Like they don't have a notion of that. You know what? How many people listening right now know where Angola is on a map or that Angola is even a place? Like, I'm not
No,
even being funny. Like,
no
Americans are
shade,
not
but it's
properly
true.
educated.
No, it's true.
Like,
No shade, but true.
but true. Like, it's not shady if it's the truth, right? Like, so to your point, right? Like, people don't even know that, so they're gonna be like, oh, this is wonderful, Jessica.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Thank you so much. Anyways, so we've talked about all the things. Before I wrap us up, is there anything that you're like, the people got to hear this? The people got to know.
Is that reparations is what we need. And then
Yeah.
also we need to create our own spaces, because what we learn about, what I don't think this woman has spoken about in her work, because she doesn't understand Marinage. She will never understand maroon communities in Marinage.
Mm-hmm.
Marinage is about creating alternative systems, even when the dominant, the white supremacists, and
Yep.
and the vulture like system is still alive, creating
Yes.
alternative functional systems. So it's also about us creating those alternative functional systems that are supportive and that call out colorism, white supremacy, and try
Mm-hmm.
to take that out of the situation,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the alternative. So we also need to
Yeah.
support and create our alternative systems and really support each other, because we
Yeah.
have to understand that these larger systems are not for us. Even if they attempt to decolonize, it's
Yep.
still, we're still at the bottom of this pecking order. So at
Yeah.
the end of the day, alternative systems need to be for us, by us, and we really need to watch
Mm-hmm.
for this, for people who are coming in just to be a parasitic force to
Yeah.
break us down,
Co-opt. Yeah. To
co-opt
co-opt
this
and
space,
capitalize.
to
Yeah.
make us not connect, to make us fearful of
Yeah.
each other,
Yep.
to make us think, well, is this person that, is this another Krug? Oh, is this,
Yeah.
and is this person faking their identity? Is she even really
Yeah.
from Puerto Rico? Is, like
Right.
me, if I come in and speak Spanish and I'm from a Jamaican and Black American background, am I going to be looked at as crazy? It's just like, nah.
Right.
No, we are multilingual, multifunctional, multimelanated people,
Yes.
and we need to make sure that we have these true conversations to keep us going and keep us strong. We need to address white supremacy and
Yes.
colorism and make sure that the parasites, the narcissists, and the blackface imposters are out.
Yes. I love it. That's a great way to end the show. The last thing I like to do is always a call to action. I like to give listeners a thing to do. So the first call to action I'm going to give them, and the link will be in our show notes. Everybody go definitely read this Medium article that Lisa has written. Again, the link will be in the show notes. Follow Lisa on Instagram, support her work. Again, all of the handles, all the things will be in the show notes, so y'all will be able to find them. And then I want each and every one of you to make it a point to look at your local university, wherever you are. Find a local university that has an Africana Studies department, or an African American Studies department, or Diasporic Studies department. And I want you to find real Black folk, actual Black folk, or Latinx, those of the African diaspora. And I want you to at least read one thing that they have written, and I want you to repost it. And I want you to tag them. And that is every single one of your assignments. And you can do it for many folks, but we're going to start with asking you to do just one. And I'm going to hold y'all accountable. Y'all got to tag me, and then I will repost it. So we need to start shining the light on those that are actually doing the work, that are closest to the pain, that they are teaching on, that they are expressing, and to Lisa's point, to be able to retell stories and point out the lies that have historically been told, so that something like this can't happen again. Because we can't have a Dolezal 3.0. I might just throw hands. All right, y'all. That's all I got. So until next time, I'm out. And now for Ask Weaves, a segment where you get to pick my brain for free. Hey, Jillian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here. I will tell people because I've had to tell people that are listening because they can probably tell. Jillian and I already have a relationship. Like she's not like just a stranger. Some people are on here and like I've never talked to them before, and some folks are like people that I'm actually in community with. So if you're like, oh, y'all seem hella familiar, that's why y'all.
Yeah,
Anyways,
I'm trying to get Weeze to marry me. She hasn't said yes yet, but I'm getting close.
you know what though? If Steven is cool with divorce, for those that don't know, Jillian lives in the UK. Like it might be necessary. It might happen sooner than you think.
We'll make it work. We'll make it work for you.
It'll be fine. He'll be okay.
He'll definitely be okay.
Anyways, what can I answer for you today?
Oh, okay. I have a big question.
Okay.
So I'm curious how you advise people, or you've maybe dealt with this yourself, how to deal with harmful practices in the coaching industry or harmful individuals or harmful training practices. How do you know when to call people out? How do you know when to call people in? And how do you know when to just walk away?
I'm laughing because it's the coaching industry, and my first response is just burn it all the fuck down because it's
Okay.
all trash. But
And
that's not
done.
true, right? An episode over. But that's not true because, like, technically, I'm coaching adjacent. And there are a lot of people in the coaching industry that are phenomenal humans and doing it right. So, that being said, how do I how do I deal with it? So the first is like low key, I don't. Like I have a very clear line in the sand for myself. And this is how I advise other folks too, right? Um, you have to figure out first your values, right? So like Jillian, I'm talking to you, but like I would say this to anyone. Like Jillian, what are your values? What are your human values? What are your business values, right? What are your core principles? Get really clear on those
Mm,
because the coaching industry will test them and try them at every step of the way. The coaching industry, just like many industries, like almost like all industries, is incredibly white centered, right? Because our society is. The reason that the coaching industry feels more insidious, and I'm so much more critical of the coaching industry, just like I am wellness in general, and just like I am healthcare or mental health, is because those are industries that are, in theory, supposed to be serving people, guiding people, and creating spaces that are intentionally and very um, purposefully safe,
mm,
inclusive, that consider a whole human, that create spaces for vulnerability because you need people to be vulnerable if you're going to transform them or treat them, right? Treat them
mhm,
being for mental health and medical. And yet we see the exact opposite in wellness across the board, be it like from coaching to therapy to right MDs.
mm,
And so that's why I'm super, super critical of the wellness industry than more so than any other industry, because we have a phenomenal amount of responsibility in our hands and we are weaponizing whiteness,
mm,
even against white folks. um, Left and right in the practices themselves, in the ways that we do business, in the way that we contractually obligate people to, continue paying for things that they've already said either they maybe lost their job and can't pay for, and or they're not actually getting the service that was promised, or whatever the case may be. So get really clear on your values, and then and this is where the commitment comes in. You have to commit to literally always saying the thing.
mm,
Because if we want to change the industry, we have to name all of the problems that we see when we see them. So I'll say this. There's like a few things that I always say, and I'll say till the day that I die. And one of them is, it's just like at the airport. See something, say something.
hmm.
As far
I
as
like
I'm
that.
concerned, there's never a, you know, when should I say something or when should I not? If you see harm being caused, if you see whiteness being weaponized or any form of privilege being weaponized, right? Because there is cis privilege being weaponized in the coaching industry, male privilege in the grossest way being weaponized in the coaching industry, bro, marketing
being weaponized in the culture. Like,
Oh, yeah.
there's so many forms of privilege and the intersection of privilege being weaponized, right? So when you see it, you gotta name it. You absolutely have to. Now, that doesn't mean though that you have to stay in it. And so for me, it's just like with anything else, right? Whether it's a personal relationship or a professional relationship. So you see something, you say something. And also I think it's important to note, like, as far as I'm concerned, calling people in and calling people out are the exact same thing. It's just that white folks who are being called in around anti-racism or being called into anti-racism have weaponized their fragility against the caller inner. And so they're like, you called me out, because then it absolves them from culpability and responsibility and looking at themselves. And they've literally tried to flip the script and make the person calling them in the problem, right? That's the only difference. So when somebody is capable of hearing you, they've been called in. When they're incapable of hearing you and then they make you the problem, Jillian, you're so aggressive. Jillian, you're mean.
Yeah.
Jillian, you're an asshole. Why would you call me out? The fuck? Because you just did some wild racist shit. That's why. And I know Jillian, so I'm gonna tell you right now, Jillian is neither mean nor aggressive in the way, like, you're fierce and passionate, but not aggressive in the way that, like, when people are like, you're dehumanizing me. Can you say it nicer? Like, that's just not even you as a human.
No.
Right?
Not at all.
But they're the same thing. It's just, how is the person who is being called out receiving it? Are they in a place to hear it? Because if they're not in a place to hear it, all of a sudden it's not their problem, right? How do you absolve yourself from critique or from having to course correct? You make yourself the victim. That's the only difference, but it's all the same. Calling in and calling out are the exact same thing. Exact same thing.
Wow. You're so good. You're so
Thank you.
good.
Thank you. So that being said, that's why I say always name it. And also, for those that are being called in or called out, take a moment and ask yourself, or not even ask yourself, take a moment and humble yourself and decenter yourself. Because guess what? If you've done something that's caused harm, it is not the responsibility of the person who has been harmed or the individual trying to advocate for the harm to wrangle their natural reaction to being harmed. That's like, Jillian, I'm going to shoot you in the arm and then have the audacity to be like, why are you screaming? I just shot you, right? Like, you're in pain. You have the absolute freedom to express your pain.
Yeah.
Right? So all of that being said, that's my little note to the people getting called in that are like, no, but could you say it nicer? Nah, stop tone policing people. Anyways, so see something, say something, always, always, always call it out. And now to the question of, but when do I walk away? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
My fundamental belief is that if people can hear you, right, they're receptive, then you give them the space to course correct, right? I believe in redemption culture. So you give them the space to do better. You tell them how you either think they need to restore harm. If you're advocating for someone, right, you're like, hey, this is what I've been told, right? The person closest to the pain doesn't want to talk to you maybe, or is in too much pain to advocate for themselves, but they've asked me to tell you that they need XYZ, right? Or whatever the case may be. Right? Because again, you know this, but I'm saying this for the listeners, you let the people closest to the pain dictate what harm restoration looks like. So if people can hear that, then stay in it with them, right? This is how we move. This is how we change people. This is how we change society. This is how we change through interpersonal relationship. However, there are going to be the people that are so committed to misunderstanding you and so committed to pride and ego and so committed to doubling down on harm that they are completely incapable of listening, hearing you, or changing. And when that happens, they've signaled to you that they cannot be moved. So why waste your time and energy there? You walk away. But you don't walk away silently. You got to let people know, hey, Joanna, I don't know who Joanna is, but that just came to my head. Hey, Joanna, you have signaled that you are more committed to misunderstanding me and to upholding the harm that you've caused in order to protect your ego. And I literally cannot be in community with people like that. And I cannot engage in conversations with people who have signaled those things. So I'm going to go ahead and close the door on this right now. Now, I believe in redemption culture, so I'm not going to lock it on you. I'm not going to close the door and lock it and throw away the key. But I am going to close the door and I'm going to limit access because you do not get to be around me. And I'm not going to give you my energy. But when you are ready, at whatever point, whether it's tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, and you recognize how deeply fundamentally harmful you've been, rooted in whichever version of privilege, knock on the door and I'm happy to open it and continue a conversation. But until that point, as the Brits say, jog on.
Wow. I mean, I've never heard it said quite so eloquently before. And I don't know if I've ever witnessed that. So I'm curious, like, have you come up with this through experience? Like, have you actually seen this? This sounds like utopia
I do this
to
all the
me.
time. I do this all the time. I did it 4 times today on Instagram.
Wow.
This is literally like what I just described is literally to a T how I engage. And that's before, the quote unquote social media followers. And because, I am inherently anti-social media.
Mhm.
And I I show up now on social media just because it has become a phenomenal tool for, educating and moving people. And we need movement right now, especially with the upcoming American election. But this is a practice that I have practiced, I would say probably for like the last decade in my even in my personal life. Like if somebody just crosses a boundary that I've established, like Jillian, if you and I are in conversation and I'm like, hey, you know what? Boundary. Like I cannot engage in this right now, or I can't, whatever, or like you've harmed me and you're like, I don't give a fuck. Like double down, double down, double down. I'm going to keep, crossing your boundary. Then that's something that I would even do, that I do even in my personal life. Like, yo, Jillian, you really just signaled to me that you are more interested in like your pride and ego than hearing and honoring my humanity. And I don't get down like that. Like I can't be in community with you. So I'm out. And then I block people.
Yeah.
Because I'm not required to give access to anybody. And if you can't honor, because here's the other thing, let's be real. When you set that boundary, people are like, how dare you? And then they typically like will rage out. And I'm like, nah, I said what I said. You clearly couldn't respect the boundary before. You're not going to respect it once I double down on my own boundary to prioritize my own peace. You can get blocked. Bye.
Yeah. I love that. And it's like, it's just coming full circle for me. The more you're saying this, I'm like, oh, but how do you know? How do you know? And like, how do you feel so centered around this? And it was literally the first thing you said, which is like, get really clear on your values as a human, as a business owner within this problematic coaching industry, which is in some ways amazing and so powerful and also so full of bullshit.
Yeah.
And I love that. And it just is a constant reminder for me to come back to that over and over again. Because I experience sometimes that literal like, oh my God, if I say this thing to this person, it's going to ruin my business. It's going to ruin my band. It's going to ruin my reputation. And oh my God. And it's just easier to pretend and not say the thing.
Yeah.
And not know when to walk away. And I love that you were saying that, like you walk away, but you walk away declaring what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then leaving that door open. I mean, it sounds so easy. And I'm curious, how long did it take you or did you have these like very adrenaline reactions when you first started doing this? And
like my whole body would shake.
Yeah. How long did it take you to not get that way?
I would say that it was probably, it took me a good couple months. And what I realized for myself, and so this is something I actually tell all of my clients, like anyone that asks, is the way that I ended up centering myself was by creating tools. So what I would do was, because the reality is this, the phrasing that I just gave you, it doesn't really matter what the situation is, right? Ultimately, it's always the same phrasing. Like you switch out people's names, you switch out, maybe specific instances, but the phrasing is always the same. Like, I don't have capacity for this thing, or I will not allow you to engage with me in this way, or this thing is wrong and I don't believe in, whatever. And so what I ended up doing was creating these like, almost like auto responses in my phone. And I would I literally to this day, like I have a note in my phone that has these responses already written out, and I write them when I'm like totally at peace and I'm calm. And so anytime something would come up, and because honestly, a lot of the times, just the way that we communicate now as grownups, unfortunately, or in society in general, is like digital, right? Like it's via text and it's in messaging and whatever. I would literally just copy paste, switch out the specific, kind of details that needed to be switched. And then really important, I had to start to remind myself, and I would say it every single time right before I sent it, divest from the expectation of a certain kind of response. And so it became a reflexive practice. So I would say, yeah, like it took a couple months after creating that tool of like doing it over and over and over again, and then continuing to remind myself, divest from an expectation of a particular type of response. Like, let your boundary be the thing. Let your boundary be enough. Let you protecting your peace be priority. And I would just like repeat that to myself over and over and over again. And now it literally is a reflexive response where I'm like, I don't give a fuck how you feel. Because you let me know from the beginning that you don't care about people, and or you don't actually care about me and my humanity, right? Depending on the situation, if I'm advocating for someone else or for self. Because people who authentically honor other folks' humanity, if I'm like, hey, Jillian, when you did something, it hurt me. You're not going to be like, well, fuck you, and this is why I did it. You're going to be like, oh, wow. Even if you didn't know, right? Man, I didn't mean to. I'm so sorry. How can I make it better?
Yeah, it's interesting. I love that. I mean, it's so simple. It's so simple. And I love the idea of using that tool and coming back to things when you feel really peaceful, because these conversations, whether it's leaving a training program that was full of harm and narcissists and, perpetuating more of this bullshit in this wellness industry, in the coaching industry, or, somebody that is paying you, an employer, and whether that's a corporation or an entrepreneur, or sometimes even a client, like, how do you deal with that? And this is so beautiful to be able to like tap back into your values as a human, as a business owner, understand where your boundaries are, understand when you're advocating for yourself or others, and fall back into this over and over again. Say the thing, and when you need to walk away and continue to say the thing, continue to advocate, and like come back to that sense of peace. Because I know for myself, if I'm not at peace, I can't do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and I will just reinforce again, it does. It sounds so simple, and it is so simple, but, and also, right? Our social conditioning gets in the way, the way our trauma gets in the way. Like, so it has to happen in conjunction with healing as well. So you can't just also expect to like go out there and like if you know for a fact that you don't have good boundaries, it's time to start working on boundaries, right? If you know for a fact that you have a particular type of either reactivity, if it's not rooted in trauma, just emotional reactivity, and or a true trauma that is triggered by a very specific thing, like it's time to get some healing.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's one of the biggest things I've been doing recently, and I think should be rooted in the coaching industry.
I agree.
Yes. Be the change, right? That's what we're trying to do. Be the change.
Listen.
Yeah.
This was such a good convo. Thank you. That was a great question. I love that question.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for answering it so beautifully and so simply. I've got all these amazing notes, and I'm going to come back to this over and over again.
Perfect. And then the beauty of this is recorded and will be a forever episode. So you can always come back to it if you need to hear it again too.
Amazing.
All right, Lovey. Thank you so much. I appreciate you for being here. And I'll see you on the flip side.
Yeah, we'll speak soon.
We will. Bye, love.
Bye.
All right, y'all. Thanks so much for tuning in. Rate, review, subscribe, like, share this podcast with all of your peoples. Follow me on Instagram. And you can always join me in community over at Podia. Until next time.